Right, we're going to make a start, people. Could I have some quiet in the room, please? No mai haere mai, and welcome to this meeting of the Council of KCDC, 31st of August 2023. We'll start with the Council blessing in lieu of a karakia, which I'll ask Martin Halliday to read.
Through you, Madam Chair. As we deliberate on the issues before us, we trust that we will reflect positively on the communities we serve. Let us all seek to be effective and just so that with courage, vision and energy, we provide positive leadership in the spirit of harmony and compassion.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor Halliday. Do we have any declarations of interest relating to items on the agenda? Don't appear to be any. Nothing under 5 or 6. Public speaking time. I have Gavin Beattie here. He's online and he's speaking to item 10.6, the electoral system. Do we have Gavin online?
Kia ora, yes.
Welcome, Gavin. We can all hear you here.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the opportunity to speak today. I'm a former senior advisor to the Local Government Commission. Though semi-retired now, I still do some work with councils on particular representation issues, including the electoral system option and the Māori wards option. Some of you may recall I made a submission on the council's initial representation proposal prior to the last elections on the potential of STV to enhance representation on the Kapiti Coast and also the scope for enhanced role for community boards. I note first, there is no perfect electoral system. If there was, we would all use it and we wouldn't need to have this discussion. All systems have their advantages and disadvantages. What is required is more information and education on these. To me, the choice comes down to the undeniable relative simplicity of FPP versus the undeniably better outcomes of STV. So what price democracy? The better outcomes of STV relate firstly to it being a fairer system by reflecting the preference of a wider range of voters. This is because there is no incentive to vote other than in accordance with your true preferences, because your vote is transferred if your first preference is not popular enough to be elected, or the candidate is so popular they do not need all the votes they receive, with the surplus transferred to voters' next preferences. STV can also result in proportional representation for communities of interest across the district, including the likes of young voters, Māori, other ethnicities, rural electors, the disabled, and so on. I pose the question, does the council want to see more diversity around the council table? This can be achieved under STV, but it will not happen automatically. It firstly requires multi-member wards, with research suggesting these have at least 5 members, with at-large arrangements likely to be the optimum arrangement. While at-large elections may be off-putting for some, I've demonstrated on the one-pager I've circulated, this arrangement could provide the best of both worlds by enabling representation of communities of interest spread across the whole district, as well as for more local place-based communities, and with candidates able to choose which communities to target in their election campaigns. As I've also shown, this relates directly to the question of effective Māori representation, given the spread of Māori across the district. I note the officer's report says the option of establishing a Māori ward will be addressed separately by the council. I believe the two issues should actually be considered together, and this was the way the Local Electoral Act was originally structured, so as to facilitate their joint consideration. I turn now to the disadvantages of STV. As noted, it is undeniably a more complex system than FPP, but is not actually as complicated or daunting as some claim or paint it to be. I note here the comment in the officer's report: the quota calculation is complex and requires a specialist designed computer program to calculate multiple rounds of vote redistribution each time the candidate meets the quota. This unhelpfully mixes the quota with actual vote counting and doesn't help general understanding about STV or the key issues for the public. For the purposes of public understanding of the real potential of STV, the quota can simply be understood as the number of votes required divided by one more than the number of vacancies. This can conceptually be most easily understood in a single vacancy election as being votes divided by 2. You need half the votes to be elected. A small fraction is actually added to avoid a tie in that situation, and that's where the computer comes in. For the mayoralty in October 2022, I note now Mayor Holborough had 28% of the vote after the first count of votes and 51% of the final count, i.e. a majority. Clearly a stronger mandate for more voters than would have been the case with a single count, winner-takes-all FPP election. In terms of other perceived disadvantages, I've undertaken analysis of all STV elections since 2004, and some of this is shown on my one-pager relating to voter turnout and informal and blank votes, showing no significant impact from the use of STV. In conclusion, and in relation to the options now before the Council, I suggest the Council has the opportunity to show real leadership on this issue. As I briefly outlined, STV has the potential to significantly enhance diversity around the Council table and thereby promote local democracy. But it will take education and more information. This is the basis for the Future for Local Government Review panel recommendation that STV be adopted for all local government elections. As I have also alluded to here, the nature of STV is not an issue which the public can easily get to grips with and sufficiently well to make a truly informed decision in any poll, which, if a standalone poll, will be lucky to attract probably about 30% of turnout and be a considerable cost to the council. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That was extremely informative. Do we have any questions from councillors? Yes. Councillor Coe.
Thank you for that explanation. I do have a couple of questions. Given that we currently have STV in place, and given that around the table, with one or two exceptions, we have a bunch of ageing, able-bodied European elected members, what evidence have you seen of the benefits of STV? Because obviously it requires candidates to come forward who meet those minority categories. And so that's my first question. And the second question is, looking around other councils in New Zealand, what is your perception of the preferred electoral system within the rest of the country? Thank you.
Yes, good questions, and the two are linked really. I mean, in terms of the evidence of increased diversity, it is anecdotal. That's where it relates to the second question. There are only 15 councils at the moment which have adopted STV, so there isn't a large base. And there's only 6 that have had it, including Kapiti Coast, since 2004 when it first became available. But it comes to the, so as I say, there's some anecdotal information available, and I worked with Gisborne, for example, and there's a little bit of there. It comes down to this issue that, well, first of all, that it's not been used in a number of cases in the optimal situation, which as I've suggested, really is at large. A number of them, and still have it in 1 or 2 member wards, and you won't, by definition, get proportional representation in 1 or 2 member wards. So there isn't an awful lot of real hard evidence at the moment, partly because there isn't the optimum conditions, partly because it isn't widely used, and no one has done a great deal of study. And it's undeniable the majority of councils, because it's not something you easily get your head around, the majority of councils have still stuck with FPP and will continue to do so, I think, until probably there are nationwide information and education programs.
Thank you. Councillor Pravanov.
Thank you, Mr. Beattie. Jocelyn Pavanov, Waikanae Ward Councillor. So, overarching the type of electoral system we use and trying to enhance diversity in terms of our elected members, do you think that the pay actually has a big influence on that, or do you think it's more the type of electoral system we have, the pay for elected members?
Yes, I don't think the pay probably helps. I haven't really studied. I think there probably is an argument for remuneration, for looking at remuneration. But I think, and probably you, as you'll all be aware, I think the public to a large extent don't engage with local government the way those of you and those like me who are interested in local government think they should, given the impact it has on communities. And I think it's an ongoing battle. Generally, when something goes wrong or the public doesn't like council decisions, that they will, they will react to it. So I mean, I think it's a big issue in which I think the Future for Local Government has made some recommendations in relation to, but I think it's about engagement really, and as I've said, STV or the electoral system issue is not something that will easily or readily engage the community with. So I don't think it's really an issue that's likely to be very engaged with in terms of a poll. It's just something that won't grab people, I don't think, and there are a lot of issues for councils, as you well know, to try to inform and educate the community and get them more engaged.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. That was a really informative session, and I'm sure it really helps us to make an informed decision when we consider that paper later. I've just got one more question, actually, from Councillor Wilson.
Thanks, Kevin. Given that all the homework that you've done on this, I'm really interested in your view on this council had a view that 16-year-olds should be able to vote. Do you have and we're fortunate here with what Councillor Coe was saying. Fortunately, we have Councillor Hanford who helps our averages enormously. So do you have a view about 16-year-olds voting?
Personally, I am in favour of it. I think partly one of the main arguments for it is about, or some research suggesting that the earlier you engage people, the more likely they are to stay engaged.
Great, thank you.
Thank you for answering questions that were slightly out of the scope of your submission as well today, but everybody wants to tap into your wisdom on this general topic. So thank you so much for attending today and having this discussion with us. Much appreciated.
My pleasure. Thank you.
So I'm going to slightly backtrack and cover off apologies, which I skipped over. So Councillor Coford has a leave of absence, so we'll record him as an apology. Do we have any further apologies? Kirsten Harpeter is an apology today. Can I have a mover for those? Councillor Pavanov, seconded Councillor Hanford. All in favour, please say aye. Aye. That's carried. I'll also note that we have the Deputy Mayor on Zoom, also Hura Waipaki, Ngāti Toa representative online as well. Anybody else? That's great. So we'll move on to members' business. Any leaves of absence required? You can always inform the Mayor's office of those. Matters of an urgent nature haven't been advised of any. Mayor's report should have been circulated. as has become customary, I will pick out one thing to highlight, and that is the opening of the new workshop at the men's shed on Saturday. Huge congratulations. The amount of effort and work that goes on down there is absolutely extraordinary, and council staff are working with them to see how they can further maximise the use of that building under their current consents.
So, if I could also acknowledge Mr. Peter Blackler, who the building was named after, who's been an absolute massive contributor to that complex.
Yeah, to talk with that comment. Thank you, Councillor Pravanov. So now we move to reports. Our first report is 10.1 Speed Management Plan. We'll just wait for staff to approach the table. Here he comes at great speed. With rather a stack of papers.
You never know. One never goes anywhere without them.
So I'd like to welcome Ron Minima and Sean Mellon to the table to present this report. Would you have a little introduction?
No, just take it as read, please.
Yeah, I'm sure we've all read all 900 pages or so that we're sitting in our hub. So I'll just note that this has been extensively workshopped by councillors, and actually everything's been gone through with pretty much a fine-tooth comb. So yeah, we're looking forward to progressing this today, potentially. So do I have any questions from elected members? Councillor Spires.
Thank you. Just, is Waka Kotahi still only giving 50% for the funding for this? Or are they giving any more? Because, I mean, this is a directive that we have to do. And I would have thought that the more money funding might have followed.
No, so 51% subsidy is what they provide to council, and this was just assumed we would incorporate it into our existing work program and deliver it without any additional funding or resource to do it.
Thank you. Councillor Halliday.
Yes, through you, Madam Chair. Just a bit of clarity on a couple of things, if that's all right. If I could ask to go to page 55 in the agenda. I just note that in these variable areas, we've got two different street signs. We've got the 30 kilometre, which has the variable limits on it. We've also got the black ones there, which just have the picture on here just has a circle, with 30 Kura School on it. And but if these are variable areas, that looks to me like it's a permanent sign. If you just clarify that for me, how that works?
Yeah, through the chair, so the one on the left, which is black, with the red roundel, that flashes, so that's actually on the through route. So when that flashes, that'll be 30.
Yep.
And then on some of the side roads, like Turamoana Road, we'll have a static variable, so that's just permanent, and that's why it's got the times underneath. That just doesn't change.
So just for clarity, then that 30 kilometre one just comes on when it's due to be used.
And and the roundel flashes.
Cool, it's digital. Okay, that's sweet. Thank you for that. Sorry, bear with me here for a second. The other question I had was in relation to page 72, Riverbank Road. I note that we've got a split speed on that one at 50 and 60 kilometres now. I was just wondering why it's split and why we didn't just go for either one or the other. Sorry, I'll give you a chance to get to that page. It's 72.
Yeah, through the chair, well, the reason for that is between Aotaki Street and Old State Highway 1, we've got a lot of businesses. We've got the childhood centre there, so there's a lot more roadside development. And on the Riverbank Road extension, there's a lot less, though it is acknowledged that there's becoming more and more development. So in the future, as the development increases, then the case may be able to be made to reduce that to 50 in the future.
Excellent. Okie doke. And the only other question I had was on page 6. Talk about waiting for, one of the options we've got today is to go to Pakokoriki for extra consultation, but I do note that we are looking at applying for the resources to do this as part of different strategies. Is waiting till October to finalise this, is that going to put us in any disadvantage at all?
No.
Lovely, thank you very much.
Councillor Pravanov.
Through the chair. So my first question probably relates to other staff. On page 11, section paragraph 43, before that, I've raised this matter before, it just says climate change. Probably 6 months ago I started raising this matter. It was going to include the environment effects as well. It's my understanding that this is a template that we need to go to a company, an external company, to have this updated, and I'm just wondering why it's actually taken so long to have that updated, please.
Do you have an answer, friend? Might need to take that question offline, Councillor Pravanov.
Okay, thank you. My second question relates to Kapakapanui School on page 63. So on page 60, so this is, it shows a picture of, or a diagram of the exclusion zone here. And so I'm interested in understanding why it's been extended quite considerably outside that area. We've got a raised ramp that's probably 200 metres away on a separate road. And what traffic modelling has been done to identify the reasons for this and what impacts that will have on the likes of Timawana Road when people want to avoid this area?
We haven't done any modelling as such. What we've done, this is all principles based, and it's all done on the roadside development. You know, you've got the community swimming pool, skate park. There's a lot more activity with that new subdivision down Park Road, and the whole idea is there's a lot of activity. It's not related just to the school, so that's why that area has been selected, and we consulted on that proposal, and we received feedback, and we didn't receive any feedback that warranted, I suppose, us changing what we had originally proposed.
So I also see, I think it was on page 25, what might have been, and may also be page 39, that Timawana Road has been raised as a concern, and I'm just wondering about whether the cause and effects have been taken into account in putting that speed hump in.
We haven't done modelling as such, but we're very conscious that putting in raised safety platforms on especially urban connectors, they do result in people wanting to divert. And so we have, I don't believe we've got any of those along, in general, our urban connectors.
Well, I think actually Narara Road has one. It's just the one I'm referring to. Actually, it has two within probably 500 metres.
Yeah, well, that's that balance between placement and movement, and so that's the ongoing tension that we have, and this is very principles based. We're trying to get ahead of the game before a crash occurs.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Warwick.
My question was around Riverbank Road as well, because there's land on between Aotaki and Rangiuru that was sold by council and is being developed and I think marketed for industrial land. So why is there any capacity just to make it all one speed limit now? Because it's very confusing. You're going from 50 to 60 to 50 on Rangiuru Road. So can we just make it all one speed limit now or not?
That's council's decision, not mine. But probably a key thing is people, they take into account the roadside development with, you know, speed limits. So there's not a lot of development. You're more unlikely to get adherence to the speed limit, and the operating speed at the moment there is slightly higher than what on the other section. So if you artificially brought it down to 50, I would guess that actually the compliance will be a lot less than the other section between Aotaki Street and State Highway 1, Old State Highway 1. But that's not to say we can't do that in the future.
Just there's the development in that area that was sold by council is trucking along pretty quickly. My other question is on page 12, one of the risks is that a change of government could change the rules. So how much investment are we doing before we know if the rule's going to change around this?
So for the balance of this year, or the financial year, that's all from existing budgets, and we've this whole the speed management plan is taken into account that there could be a change of government, and so we've actually pitched it at quite a low level. And you'll notice around the country, most councils are definitely doing the schools, and the majority of this program is around schools. And then we've just got a few around areas with high concentrations of active road users, and we've got 3 road corridors, that's it. So I don't expect, even if there's a new government, that would have an effect on our program.
Councillor Cooper.
So am I right to say there's been no traffic modelling, and there's been no studies done into impact on productivity, and no work done on unintended consequences such as driver behaviour change through the lowering of the speeds in these areas? Is that correct?
That is correct. Yep. However, also be aware what we proposed, the original consultative draft, this proposal covered 7% of all of the road length within Kapiti, and so what we've now has got even less. And when we spoke to heavy haulage and public transport, they actually had no real issues with what was being proposed.
This may be an unfair question, and I don't mean it to be argumentative or nasty. That's not,
I hope not, Councillor Cooper.
No, it's not me. But would it be fair to say then this is an ideology-based approach as opposed to evidence-based approach?
It's a principle-based approach.
Okay. Thank you. Thanks. Cheers. Thank you.
I just have a follow-up question on that. So we're not the only council doing this. This is a legislatively required piece of work. The kind of work that Councillor Cooper asked about, would that be done by other councils? Are we doing the usual amount of background research, and is our approach consistent with what other councils are doing?
We've basically followed NZTA guidelines, and probably in answer to your question a little bit more, if you did modelling, I think we've got about 400 or so kilometres, 450 kilometres. We're looking at 7 kilometres. So if we did the modelling, it's going to be such a small amount, I don't believe it would show any change in travel patterns at all. And I believe also, I haven't seen the report, in Auckland, I believe that there was not public transport, emergency services. They were a bit worried about response times with speed humps, etc. And when they did a study there, which I haven't seen, of being told it actually made no difference. We're very keen, for example, like Riverbank Road and roads like that going forward, we're very keen not to put speed humps on those kind of roads in the future. Definitely not.
Councillor Coe.
Thank you. In your expert opinion, and feel free to choose not to answer this, but we are doing this because we've been told to do it, basically. But in your expert opinion, are these recommended approaches things that make common sense anyway, regardless of what government may require us to do?
Yes, I definitely believe they are. If you look around schools, that's definitely the right thing to do, whether it's legislated or not. It is the right thing to do.
I might just add a little bit to that. So the council had previously, the part of the last long-term plan, asked us to prioritise work around schools in terms of speed management and safety. So it's been an ongoing focus for the council for at least the last 3 to 5 years, and we've been trying to move towards that and do work incrementally. This process has probably has sped that up really in terms of the overall approach.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, thanks. In the likelihood that this goes ahead, the The primary negative feedback that I heard was from tradies who in the morning are dashing hither and yon, and of course they live in the burbs like anybody else. So post a decision, is there an information plan? So the likes of KEDA and the Chamber of Commerce and the BNI groups, just to make sure that they're all, I hate to use the pun, up to speed on it. And so just the education program basically.
Yes, there is going to be some more publicity, depending on what the council decides. And also we're going to be doing before and after monitoring on every site, so we can actually learn from that as well, what works and what doesn't, and we can use that as an input into the next speed management plan. Can I just also add, probably a key thing is on the Part B, which is beyond 27, the community made it quite clear that they didn't want speed limits reduced over all of Kapiti Coast, and on all the urban connectors they actually were asking for, the proposal was safe crossing points and also slowing down the entry-exit speeds on some of the side roads. So the proposal at the moment is no change to speed limits on all those urban connectors like Te Moana, Riverbank Road. It's more just infrastructure based. And also around the schools, last time we talked about the school zone with speed limits, we're now talking about a school zone, speed limits and or infrastructure. So it could be that the next plan around schools, there could be no changes to speed limits, but there just might be some infrastructure like some footpaths, crossing points, that kind of thing. So that's quite a shift. It's more to speed management as opposed to speed limits.
Thank you. Councillor Warwick.
I just wanted to, you mentioned something about studies with the emergency services in Auckland, but you've talked to Otaki Fire Brigade, who actually, I think, have statistics, do they, about the speed humps slowing their response time? Did you talk to, we've got to consider our emergency services as well, because they actually have to stop to go over speed humps. Did they provide any statistics to you, solid information?
No, but I did meet Ian King, and he gave me some information regarding other volunteer fire brigades, and the idea is as we go forward we'd like to know a bit more about what their key routes are, a bit like the over dimension routes, so we can actually protect those and take those into account when we do our future planning, and that'll be the next stage.
Great, I'm not seeing any further questions except for Nigel Wilson.
Sorry to be a pain. Hey, just the question around who pays for this, given that this is a government directive, how much of the bill is the government picking up and how much of the bill are we picking up or expected to?
The financial assistance rate at the moment is 51%, so that's about 1.5 million of the 3 million, so it's about $500,000 a year for 3 years.
That's the subsidy?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
Right, but before I look for a mover and a seconder for these motions, I'd like to acknowledge the work that you've done, Ron, on this. It's a huge amount of work, and the staff who've been assisting you through the process. I think it's a real testament to your team, how you've got out and about, and the amount of submissions that have come back and the level of engagement's been absolutely incredible. I'd also like to acknowledge the involvement of the community boards in this work. It's been instrumental to getting those local solutions included for our consideration today. So I've got some recommendations on page 6 of council agendas. Basically approving the speed management plan, but excluding Paikakariki Village for a bit more consultation around the extent of the 30-kilometre zone, and then finishing off with Paikakariki in October. So Councillor Handford is the person who facilitated our discussions around this. Would you like to move these recommendations? Councillor Handford has moved, seconded. Councillor Halliday. Right of introduction.
Yeah, I don't really feel like I have too much to say because we've kind of talked a lot about the speed management plan through multiple workshops and the opportunity to talk with the public and through community board meetings, and just your ongoing engagement, Ron, and the team at those community board meetings and then at the pop-in sessions in the council chambers has just been yeah, next to none. It's been awesome. So thank you so much for all of that time and energy. I'm looking forward to seeing what comes back from the Paikakiriki community around the blanket 30 kilometres speed limit. I think we're going to have some quite interesting conversations and potentially hear a whole bunch of different views, but I think it's good to test it and put it out into the mix. And yeah, I really appreciate and acknowledge what you've said, Ron, around the need to look at speed management and how we design our places and spaces for people to be going slower, so that in turn we're keeping people safe, specifically those who are walking and cycling to school. I think that's the fundamental purpose behind this, and I really support that, and us going even further and faster on that in the second stage as well. So awesome too to see the Poplar Ave crossing sorted through this process, because that's been something that Paul Callister and Sarah Cress and others have campaigned hard on, coordinating a petition of hundreds of signatures. And so to see what is a really crucial link in our CWB network kind of get some focus within this, and is really a testament to their advocacy. So thank you again, Ron, Sean, Rashur, the rest of the team for your work, and yeah, really excited to be supporting this today. Oh, VJ.
Yeah, we just added VJ into that list. VJ saying. Councillor Halliday.
Yeah, through the chair. Look, just supporting both your comments and Councillor Hanford's comments. Ron, I just really appreciated your common sense approach in this whole scenario, and the fact I think we've been very well served with regards to looking after our schooling areas and addressing all that. And I'm quite confident that we'll get maximum that we can out of government with regards to all this being put in place. And I appreciate this is just stage one, really, and looking forward to seeing how the rest of this goes. But if the previous process is any example, I'm sure it'll go very, very well.
Councillor Wilson.
Yeah, just wanted to reiterate the awareness of the government's imposition of policy without the funding to go with it. So, you know, this is, when people get their rates demands, this is one of the reasons. I'm not saying that the work itself isn't of value, it's just that who's paying for it is the question mark. I would actually just like to congratulate the typist. Whoever is responsible for typing up 900 pages did a brilliant job. And also the awareness campaign. I don't think a lot of people out there are aware of the relatively small percentage of roading that's affected by this. So I think that's actually quite important. There's a general sense that every road in Kapiti is, you know, going to be down to walking pace, and so I think it's quite important to have that spelled out quite clearly. And I'll go back to my point earlier about, I do know that the tradies are dashing around early in the morning. They feel like they have been set upon by this, and I'm not quite sure they will be quite to the extent they think. So again, an awareness campaign would be of good value.
Yeah, I agree with that, and then some of the suggestions around targeting that to that particular group as well. Councillor Pravanov?
Thank you. Yes, so there has been an amazing amount of work that's gone into this process. Some of it's obviously been required by the government. But I suppose my concern is that there's been no modelling done on it, and some of the effects of pushing traffic elsewhere has not been considered. Obviously, it's about safety. One of the things that I've raised a number of times before is about how speed humps are going to be used by people on bikes, and particularly around the Kapa Nui School, Waikanae pools, where they have triathlons there, and to me, it's a major impact. So I would actually like to make an additional recommendation that the Waikanae, that around Kapa Nui School is kept out of this, and some more work is done on looking particularly at where those speed humps are. I think with the other parts of it, I'm actually fine. So yes, I'd like to make a recommendation to revisit the speed humps around Kapa Nui School.
So before we put work into wording around that recommendation, I'll just test the room to see if that would attract a seconder. So we'll need to put some words around that recommendation. I haven't been made aware of this before the meeting. Just for councillors, yeah, we don't have to have a seconder for every recommendation. If there's no seconder, it lapses for want of a seconder, which is sometimes a good course of action.
So you don't want them in?
Well, I think they need to be.
That has been seconded by, well, we don't have a seconder yet. We've had an indication that Councillor Cooper is willing to second it. We have no wording at the moment.
I'm just, the location of the students, I believe is a different.
So we're just going to adjourn for 5 minutes while we put some wording around that recommendation. Thank you.